So Richard, we don't need to use this. That's enough, is it? Yeah, we tend to use it. I think our habit.
Okay, Madam Mayor, we're now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome members, officers and any members of the public watching this evening's extraordinary meeting of the Council. Item 1, apologies from absence. Miss Willis, may I have apologies of any absence, please?
Madam Mayor, I've received apologies from Councillor Aldrich and Councillor Bentley.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest to declare in relation to the matters which we are considering this evening? No, thank you. Item 3, the motion. I would like to ask Councillor Tim Fitzgerald to move his motion and indicate if he wishes to reserve his right to speak. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, members and officers. Your efforts to attend this extraordinary meeting are very much appreciated. I hope the outcome of this evening's meeting will also be appreciated by residents of Surrey Heath in years to come. I propose the motion on the agenda and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Do you have a seconder?
I do. Councillor Cliff Betton will.
Councillor Betton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second the motion and also reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to exercise your right to speak?
He said no.
Thank you. This is an extraordinary meeting, but it's about a rather ordinary subject. The community has lost faith in the planning system. This motion is an attempt to restore residents' faith. In preparing the motion, I've tried to be forward-looking as much as possible and not to look back into the past. However, we do need to refer to the past. The purpose of the motion you have before you is to ensure that the events and decisions that have permitted the development at Woodside Cottage, Chapel Lane site in Bagshot are not allowed to be repeated elsewhere. The Chapel Lane development allowed 44 dwellings instead of the 15 calculated from the 2000 local plan. You will remember that the Planning Application Committee voted unanimously to refuse planning permission sought by Carla Holmes. The council were unable to defend this position later at the appeal to the planning inspector, and sadly, destruction, or should I say construction, is at that site is now in progress. Members, your support is needed this evening to pass this motion that seeks to implement the guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, NPPF, Section 4, and best practice of the Local Government Association. This guidance includes pre-application consultation with statutory and non-statutory consultees, neighbourhood forums, and early reporting to the Planning Application Committee and ward councillors. The NPPF recommendations and LGA recommendations should ensure that the public are engaged at the first opportunity rather than too late to have any real effect. Page 29 of the LGA guidance states, the involvement of communities is critical to the success of the development planning system. This is reinforced in the NPPF, which states in paragraph 66, applicants will be expected to work closely with those directly affected by their proposals to evolve designs that take account of the views of the community. Proposals can demonstrate this in developing the design of the new development and should be looked on more favourably. In page 29 of the LGA guidance, it states, communities all over England are demonstrating their ability to take far-reaching positive decisions about this type of development, the type of development they want to see in their communities through neighbourhood planning. These communities are showing their capacity to consider development constructively and to work with developers and landowners to influence development in a way that is far removed from passive consultation. Surely, members, encouraging this community involvement and participation is the right thing to do. The local plan in Surrey Heath dates from the year 2000. The year 2000 was before broadband. Home computer connections to the internet were via dial-up modems. Who remembers that? And this virtual meeting would be impossible. The local plan 2000 was extensively updated in 2012, though some of the policies were saved. However, this 2012 core strategy document itself is now quite old. There's a new local plan being drafted. This is intended to run from 2016 until 2032. Clearly, the draft local plan has missed its initial intended start date, but it is due to go out to consultation stage fairly soon. This motion seeks to ensure that the local plan is reviewed at least every 5 years, in line with government and LGA guidelines. Surely Surrey Heath Borough Council should be following government guidelines in maintaining its local plan. This might restore residents' faith in the planning system in Surrey Heath. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Councillor Betton, would you like to exercise your right to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to second this motion. It's clearly an important motion because it has prompted the officers to prepare a briefing document, which is, I am told, unprecedented. But I must say most welcome, as officer input into motions can only increase their quality, and I look forward to this practice continuing going forward. But in reality, it's quite mundane. It's not exciting at all. As Councillor Fitzgerald has stated, it's merely proposing that Surrey Heath Borough Council adopts and follows the best practice guidelines of the Local Government Association. The motion, as we know, originated from the Chapel Lane planning application and subsequent planning inquiry, at which I spoke, to be immediately followed by our local MP, Mr. Michael Gove, who agreed with everything I said and even mentioned me by name on 3 occasions in his submission. And for those of you who are wondering, no, I didn't get a Christmas card. But this motion is not about Chapel Lane. Mistakes were made and the chair of the planning committee apologised to the committee, as that's what mea culpa means. But we move on. And although personally, I do not believe that any individual was to blame for what occurred, if I couldn't persuade the inspector and a senior cabinet minister also had their effect, then we cannot pass motions that will address the situation. What we can do, and what this motion is designed to do, is to improve the process for the future and to help to minimise the chances of being caught out in similar fashion again. When I was elected to this council in 2019, I, along with probably half the members here, spent 45 minutes or so with the then Chief Executive, Karen Whelan. One of the things that she told me was about the importance of local councillors in the planning process. Like many people, she explained, officers of the council do not necessarily reside in the borough, but commute from their home to their place of work. They are not necessarily as familiar with local people and places as are the ward councillors, and it is for that reason that local councillors are so important in the planning process. The council, in fact, has contracted out housing with the transfer of council houses, excuse my old-fashioned terminology, to housing associations in the form of Accent. Waste collection is no longer a Surrey Heath function, it's being contracted out to Total Waste Solutions. And even Meals on Wheels, apologies again, is now a contracted out venture with Runnymede. So what does the council do that affects people's lives? What can we as councillors look our residents in the eye and say that we do for them? The answer is green spaces, licensing, and yes, planning. And it's planning that has the greatest effect, and from affecting the value of an individual's property to determining what the future of the borough looks like, planning is the key to what we as councillors can do. At the planning meeting immediately after the inspector's report was received, we were informed by Mrs. Reckard that the legal situation was such that if the committee voted against the advice of the officers, then there could be no officer support. Basically, if the councillors on planning take a different view on an application to that of the officers, then we are on our own. So logically, if you extend that point of view to the decision making of the planning committee, what exactly are councillors involved for? Why do we waste our time by countermanding what the officers have concluded? It's a long way from having a local democratic input into the planning process. It is the case that if councillors wish to exercise their rights and go against the advice of the planning committee, that the members of the committee have to seek professional, expert advice from a third party. That can't be right. Professionals have opinions, and in any legal case, there are lawyers on both sides of an argument. And that is what is needed here, and what, according to the advice we've been given, is exactly what we cannot have. The purpose of this motion is to follow best practice as set out in the Local Government Association guidelines. It's clear to me on reviewing the briefing note that the council is not currently following best practice in all respects, and that the whole system needs to be brought in line with current best practice and the thinking. We should not be following plans that are 20 years out of date and the wishes of councillors who are no longer members of this council. If you want to maintain the status quo and truly believe that the best interests of residents are being served, then vote against this motion. If you think that things can be improved and the council should operate in line with government recommended best practice, then that is what is being called for, then I urge you to support the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bessam. I would like to invite members to discuss the motion and make any comments. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I check, please, is this the appropriate time for me to suggest an amendment to the motion?
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. I'd like to reserve my right to speak on the amendments, if I may, please, Madam Mayor. First and foremostly, I would like to say that although I feel the timing of this particular motion is a little bit unfortunate, I do hold a great deal of sympathy with some of the intent behind the originator of the motion. And that is that I think that what all of our residents want is a clear and transparent planning process in which they can have absolute confidence. I would like to amend the motion to say that actually I would like to strike out the preamble to it in terms of what the council is noting and what the council believes in, because I feel that some of that is likely to distract from the resolution that the councillors have put forward. I too sat through 3 days of the Chapel Lane inquiry, and I too spoke in support of the residents. I was also at the planning meeting when the head of planning apologised for errors, and I would like to say that they didn't relate directly to the planning process as happened, but the decision that related to engagement with other members of the planning authority before the our planning department decided to withdraw. I would also like to make the amendment, I feel, slightly stronger in terms of supporting our residents and supporting our officers, importantly, in the ability to have a completely transparent planning process. I would therefore like to amend point A to say that rather than suggesting that we review the Surrey Heath local plan in full every 5 years, and going back to one of the previous speakers' points that our current local plan is taking a very long time to get through, that we agree and move a motion to conduct an internal review of the Surrey Heath local plan and bring a suggested programme of work to the scrutiny committee no later, the scrutiny committee and or the local plan working group, if that's still in process in October, so it's committee no later than October 2021, and that thereafter the plan should continue to be reviewed on an annual basis internally and recommended as necessary any sections of the plan for a fuller review as a rolling programme of work, including the appropriate level of consultations to ensure that our local plan remains consistent with the government, locally adopted policies, and also by implication, the wishes of our residents. I would like to move point B, the LGA pre-application good practice advice. We are, as members, now consulted fully on all pre-application advice that is given. And that amendment was brought forward by Councillor Graham Alloway earlier on in this council's term and is now in practice. And one of the things that was explained to us at that point was the confidential nature of pre-application planning advice. So I would like to amend that part to say that we adopt a transparent modus operandi by amending the planning engagement stage to include a statement to applicants that says, your pre-application request, together with any documents or responses made by the council, will be made available for public inspection unless you confirm in writing to us that the information provided is commercially sensitive. If the local planning authority receives a request under the Freedom of Information Act or the Environmental Information Regulations to disclose the information relating to this pre-application inquiry, they may be obliged to do so unless the information is deemed exempt under the Act. So therefore, I am asking that all applicants outline in a table, which unfortunately you can't all see, but I'll read out the headings for it, or the contents, the same information that would be included in that table. Within the pre-application covering letter, items which you consider are confidential and genuinely commercially sensitive, which are not for disclosure in respect of your application. Commercially sensitive documents not for disclosure to third parties under the Freedom of Information Act or Environmental Information Regulations. And I would like to further extend the transparency for our residents by extending the same approach to ensure that the approach and the associate publication to include all correspondence that relates to non-material amendments, which should be published on the planning portal within 10 days of issue or receipt. In terms of point D, I would like to say that for major developments over 10 dwellings, or for change of use applications, a standard letter, absolutely agree, this is unchanged from the motion, should be sent to pre-application inquiries which make clear to developers on what consultation the Borough Council expects them to carry out. I would then remove the and regular checks should occur to ensure that best practice is adhered to by developers. If developers have been found to have not consulted adequately according to LGA advice, the council must show leadership and engage in its own consultation. And I would like to amend that part to say, expects them to carry out, and an applicant should be encouraged not to progress the application until this can be demonstrated. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As before, I reserve the right to speak on the application unless I do that now, or more fully now. Thank you.
Do you have a second to Councillor Wheeler? Councillor Bates?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will reserve my right to speak, if that's okay. But I do second this amendment, and I will make my comments in due course.
Thank you. It's a rather lengthy motion, Councillor Wheeler, so we would like to put it up on screen and let members read it and digest it before before there's any comments made on it. Are you happy with that, Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, absolutely, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, on a point of order.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to have an adjournment of say 20 minutes, so members who have not seen this motion can actually read this in off screen and discuss it within their groups. Is that possible?
I was just going to check that, Councillor Eyes, bear with me, please. Can we do that? Can we give them 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. 10 or 15.
I've been advised that yes, we can do that. We will put it on screen and we will adjourn the meeting for 15 minutes.
Madam Mayor, can I just make a clarification, please? Point of order.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, just one point, not to do with the actual motion, but I'd just like to clarify one point that Councillor Betton made in his speech, and that was referring to the council contracting out services to other parties. That's totally an error. We don't contract out services. We actually work with other boroughs and other councils for the benefit of our residents. It's not about contracting out, whether it be Meals on Wheels that he referred to, or refuse. So I just want to make that as a point of clarification. If you read the notes on the various executives where these changes have been made and these transformation deals have been put through, he'd be better informed. So thank you very much indeed, Madam Mayor, for allowing to make that clarification. And perhaps hope they're better informed in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. I will now adjourn the meeting for 15 minutes. So that'll be 25 to 6:35.
Yes, 25 to 7.
Yeah, 25 to 7.
We'll send it by email as well.
Right.
No, we're not.
No, you're not on mute.
No, you're not on mute.
Before that, do you want to?
Madam Mayor, could somebody email this to us, please?
Just let them know. Yes, we're just doing that.
Yes, Councillor Baglam, it is being emailed to you all.
Yeah, very clearly, it's red. Lots of red lines here.
Could somebody please confirm if we're to leave the meeting for this 15 minutes? Obviously, we need letting back in. Is that going to be an issue?
No, no, Councillor Whitcroft, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Lay down. Good dog. Good boy. Just stay there. Stay.
David, you're not
Well
on mute.
done, David's dog. Well done for staying.
Yeah.
If you want to wait a minute, people are coming back on the.
They are coming back.
Yeah, they're coming back. So perhaps wait a minute, if that's okay.
Look at Banzai. Rachel, is everybody back on your screen? Because I only can not quite. Okay.
Four.
We've done 2 or 10 now, so that'd be well.
Leaders not. Still a couple left. Yeah. So Rachel, we've still got one more.
2 more.
2 more.
3. It's actually 4. Sorry, it's included.
It's 1, 3.
People aren't in the waiting room, are they still?
No, they're there.
No, everybody is in the waiting room, is now in the meeting. There's no one waiting.
Okay. So if you keep an eye out.
Well, welcome back, members. Councillor Bates, would you like to speak to this amendment now, or?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to speak later if that's okay. So I know I have the right to second the speech, but I would like to hear some discussion first, then I will make my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, members, some of you may wish to speak. I would just remind you that you only have 3 minutes. Although we will try to be flexible, do bear in mind there's a lot of you that may wish to speak. So are there any members that would like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to begin with that. I'm actually really disappointed with the mover of this amendment. At no point since this motion was submitted and this council meeting call has there been any sight of this amendment in order for the proposer of the amendment to actually scrutinise what's being proposed. In my belief, this is very poor practice from supposedly experienced members of this council, and this is not the first time this poor practice has been seen in this council chamber. I would recommend that moving forward, anyone who wishes to propose an amendment actually engages with the proposer of the motion to try to reach compromise. The motion proposed by Councillor Fitzgerald was not new, and in fact that it was pointed out by some members that this motion has been submitted multiple times and withdrawn a couple of times as well. And this was a result of the evolving situation that occurred after the Chapel Lane appeal. And that was right that after the statements from the Executive Head of Regulatory and the Chair of the Planning Applications Committee, that it was the right action to take to withdraw motions at the time. And we now find ourselves with the motion that was before us, now this amendment, which was an evolution of the response. Just to respond directly to the amendment, there are parts of the amendment that I agree with. And I believe that the intention of Councillor Wheeler's amendment was in her attempt to tighten up language, which in my opinion was perfectly fine. Her amendment to 3.A would, in my opinion, be acceptable, and that we would agree that there should be continual renewal, which is what we asked for. in point B, I do have rather concerns with the amendment because it removes any reference of the local government association best practice, which is a key part of the motion. And I would ask the mover of the amendment to consider returning language into this amendment, ensuring that the LGA pre-application good practice should always be adhered to. What Councillor Wheeler has provided in this amendment is very specific language, which in my opinion, could tie the hands of this planning authority going forward. And I think it would be, we could find ourselves in a situation where we would have to review this language again. The language in the original motion provided clear guidance that we should always be following best practice. And if Councillor Wheeler wishes to go ahead with financial sensitivity or commercial sensitivity, I could not agree with her more. But if she had read the best practice from the local government association, it would be very clear that that is already covered in best practice. No one here is suggesting that this council start to release commercially sensitive information. That would place a very high legal burden on this authority if we were to do so. This motion should be about how we build our planning process going forward and how do we consult with our residents clearly. So I would ask Councillor Wheeler to think again and include language in point B, to include language on the local government association pre-application best practice. That's key here. And I think there is a chance that we can actually come together to find compromise, because I think the other points of her amendments have merit, but I am very concerned with point B. And if there is no change, I would not be able to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Councillor Malvaganam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I thank all my councillors for originally getting this motion into the council, our motion into council. I'm delighted, absolutely delighted. The community group has been spurred into action to do something very positive for a change, despite the fact they are criticizing us. But the reality is same motion, different words. Only thing that's missing here is the word LGA, because our motion was a benign motion, which fundamentally says, please follow the LGA guidelines. Like Councillor Morgan said, if we were able to come to an agreement, I'm sure Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Bates has already shown this to the other parties other than to Lib Dems and to the Greens, I understand. It would have been a nicer way to get this sorted. This is just bad politics. That's all I have to say. But I actually endorse what Councillor Morgan said. If we can change the words, put the word LGA guidelines, we are happy to support it. Until that's done, I'm afraid I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malvaganam. Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, on the pre-act aspect of the original motion, it seems to me it just embellishes the aspiration of the motion on pre-acts that was passed last summer. The aim being to promote acceptable planning applications that won't get overturned at committee. Members, I believe, will not vote through harmful or damaging applications to residents or environment simply to meet a housing quota figure. If developers don't address the concerns of residents adequately, they cannot complain and shouldn't appeal to try and force through an unacceptable plan, but modify it to make it acceptable. The borough's first duty is to its residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Allaway. Councillor Barnett.
Can you hear me all right today?
Yes, thank you.
That's a big step forward then. My notes here. Yeah, I
quite like the amendment. There's a few odds and ends that I'm uncomfortable with that I'd like to just outline. Very simply, the first one is where it refers to the scrutiny committee in the first paragraph A, and that needs to be much more specific, which actual scrutiny committee you're referring to. I agree with what previous speakers were saying regarding B. I think it's really important to have the words in there that the LGA pre-application and good practice should always be adhered to. So it's down there in black and white. I do think that's incredibly important. There's a word used in, where is it, the very last paragraph, in paragraph D of the amendment, where it says an applicant should be encouraged not to progress the application until this is demonstrated. To my mind, the word encouraged in there is just an open invitation for people to do nothing, because encourage means you can encourage them, but they may not wish to be encouraged, so that needs to be strengthened. And finally, what was the other one? No, it's gone from me now. Yeah, I may come back if possible later. I think that'll do for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Is anybody else waiting? Councillor McClafferty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Get my hand down there. I've got kind of two or three things. First of all, and I'm sorry this is so out of time, but I was looking to see if Councillor Page had joined us. And when you were looking for apologies, just about 10 minutes before the meeting, I got a WhatsApp from him, while WhatsApp was working, saying he'd been involved in a road traffic accident. I know everyone will be concerned. I can say categorically he's fine. A car smashed into the back of a car that smashed into the back of his. So he was third in line or something. He's a little bit sore, but he's absolutely fine. But of course, the police were on site, etc. So he asked me to give his apologies. So again, I'm very sorry that that was out of time. I just got caught out, couldn't find him on the screen or the two screens. A second thing, if I may, I don't quite know where to bring it in, but as a point of order, if I may, Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask a question. It's a long-standing convention that the significant cost to the council and more importantly, the impact on the officers. I know, for instance, that 2 officers have cancelled their holiday today to be here, and one has come in even though Friday's not a work day for them. The extraordinary council meetings are only called for important and urgent matters. Given there's a full council meeting only 11 working days from now, I would like to know if you were given a reason why this motion merited an ECM, and if so, if you're able to share that reason.
The meeting was requested, Councillor McClafferty, and I asked for it to be called at the earliest opportunity, which is this evening.
Okay, thank you. If I can speak to the amendment, Madam Mayor, unfortunately, although the original motion does have some merit, as Councillor Wheeler said, I agree with that. And like Councillor Wheeler, I absolutely understand the motivation to try and move us forward and improve what we do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, the original motion had a number of serious flaws. It proposed that we take actions we were already doing. It proposed we adopt policies that, frankly, we're not allowed to by law. And if I might just use an example, sorry, Councillor Barnett, you didn't actually do the thing, but the fact that I'm sure Councillor Wheeler used the word encouraged is because we have no legal right to demand. Right? We can't demand that they do a consultation. We can encourage, we can cajole, we can point out the merits of it, but any developer can frankly say, we're not going to do any consultation whatsoever. And there's nothing we can do about that. Okay, and part of the problem with the original motion, and I'm very glad it got taken out in the amendment, is that it then says, well, if they won't do it, we'll do it. Well, what a fantastic gift to developers that they no longer ever have to do any consultation. They just say no and the council will pick it up. And then what on earth would we actually consult on, given the fact that the plans are all draft anyway? They can change dramatically from 20 houses to 100 houses, and we wouldn't know about it. So I think there's some things with the original motion that just didn't understand. So rather than move us forward, I think the original motion would have severely damaged our planning policies and our resident consultations. As I say, why would developers do any if we knew we were going to pick it up for them? And although, as I said, the original motion does have some merit, and I would absolutely confirm that there are lessons to be learned from recent developments, but this is not the place for it. And as the amendment says, this should go back to, my view would be that it goes back to the local plan working group, where this should have been discussed, debated. It can have officer input, it can have legal input. I, for one, don't see any need to put LGA back in. The only thing I know about LGA best practice is what's in the motion, and I would like to understand that more, and the place to do that would be at the actual working group. Okay, and to be honest, if this does pass and it goes back to the local plan working group, and that cross-party with officer input decides that LGA best practice should be what we adopt, that recommendation will come back to the executive, and I would be happy to support it. But I don't think we should be doing this on the hoof without the ability, being limited to speak once, not ask questions, right? Not bring the officers into a political arena. So this is not the place to be doing it. Right? I'm afraid I couldn't have supported the original motion, but I'm absolutely happy to support Councillor Wheeler's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McClafferty. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take the opportunity now to second the speech and amend it. And before doing so, I do need to correct a couple of suggestions that have been made by members of the Liberal Democrat group regarding the consultation for this. I actually spoke with Councillor Fitzgerald yesterday at some length and made it very clear to him that there was no way his motion could be supported by me. I went through in detail with him exactly why that was. Ironically, and I wasn't aware this would take place, that very similar points were then sent through as a briefing note by officers later that day for factual information. So the idea that the Liberal Democrats didn't know about this is just nonsense. I actually strongly encouraged him to speak with Councillor Wheeler. I understand that he failed to do so. So I'm afraid I simply can't take that very serious at all. In terms of the LGA guidance, there seems to have been some loss of memory here by members of the Liberal Democrat group, because last year on the October 2020 full council meeting, there was a motion put forward by Councillor Graham Alloway, and I absolutely applaud him for this, which was about the LGA pre-application advice, and which had unanimous support by this council. And the issues of the legality were discussed. In fact, it was raised by Councillor McClafferty. I've gone back and looked at the video. You can all go and watch the video for yourself now, so you can see that discussion for yourself. And I was very interested to see that on that particular evening, this matter of the LGA guidance and pre-application advice, not a single Liberal Democrat had a word to say about it. Not one. Members of the community group did, because they'd proactively done something about it on behalf of our residents. Members of the Conservative group had as well, but not a single Liberal Democrat spoke up at any stage during that debate. And now we have this motion before us now. Now, I do accept a number of points that Liberal Democrats have made regarding Chapel Lane. I think there are procedures that and questions to answer about that, but there were significant flaws with the original motion. I did strongly encourage them on many times to withdraw the motion. They chose not to. That is their absolute right to do so because of these flaws that were there. And as they have failed to do so, the motion couldn't pass as it was and did need to be changed. And I'm pleased, therefore, to second this particular amendment. What, in fact, this amendment does is actually strengthens this particular issue. It strengthens the community group motion supported by all groups unanimously last year, and it goes to the maximum level that we can do within the law, because I'm not prepared as a councillor, no matter whether there's elections or not, whether this is for party political reasons or not, to break the law and go against things that we cannot legally do. And I'm sorry about that. If people are upset by that, or it may damage me politically, then that's just tough. But I'm not going to do it, and I wouldn't encourage anyone else to do that either. The amendment which has come through tonight from Councillor Wheeler addresses the key points of Chapel Lane residents. I do accept that they have got other questions to answer, and there are further processes that need to take place. But on this particular issue, what we've done here is to pick up the points which have been addressed. Councillors have said that they support the actions. It strengthened the actions, which ultimately is here as to what we're doing. It's taken away notes and beliefs which don't add anything of any value, and some of them were fundamentally incorrect anyway. And so I would actually hope that when all is said and done, we look at this and we can say, look, here is something that we can all work together on, that we can all vote in favour of, that we can all share a common belief in wanting to do about pre-applications, and we can all move forward. And I would therefore urge you to support this amendment tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Are there any other members that wish to speak on this amendment? Oh, Councillor Hawkins, Edward Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm supporting this amendment, and I thank Councillor Wheeler and for bringing it forward. And I agree with Councillor Bates and Councillor McClafferty in that this is the wrong forum for this debate. Yes, we should have, and it is only right that there is a debate. We have to move forward. We have to look at things. We have to learn from the past. And an organisation that doesn't learn and doesn't look at itself and the way it works is a dying organisation, and we're not. We are a vibrant organisation. This, I think, should come to the local plan working group, and we work it through there without being in the public gaze. And I'm not going to raise or question the motives for bringing this forward at this time. I would, however, make a couple of points on the original section where there is consultation. The parishes are statutory consultees, as are organisations where there has been a neighbourhood plan. In fact, only last night we had an application that was opposed by a local parish society on the grounds that it didn't match the neighbourhood plan on certain policies. And I regret to say, I mean, it was passed. The motion, the officer recommendation to refuse was agreed by all bar 3 members. Unfortunately, those 3 were Liberal Democrats. I think it was a shame because in this case, the society objected on the grounds of the local plan. I mean, in respect, I mean, this does seem to be dancing around Chapel Lane, and I have to say there was enormous consultation. As was first said, I mean, our local MP was involved, and the local residents mounted the most magnificent campaign. And so anybody that wasn't aware of what was going on was, I don't know where they'd been. And I have to say that I think it was Councillor Mark Gordon was part of the team that put forward a substantial amount of money to support the residents in their actions. So, to say there isn't proper consultation is wrong, but we do need to look at it. So I am very happy to support the amendments put forward by Councillor Wheeler. And I will leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Are there any other members wishing? Councillor Brooks and then Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's only a very simple comment, really, which is that I would encourage all of us, and some of us do an awful lot on this already, to make sure that as many of the public, the consultees and everybody takes part in the local plan, in making their comments known, so we can all actually consider what all residents think, businesses think, maybe, goodness me, even what developers might think. But I think we need to make sure that everybody has input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit that I listened to the comments from Councillor Bates and Councillor McClafferty with some feelings of extraordinary things I'm hearing here. Comments about, it appears from what they're saying, that the LGA guidelines require some sort of illegal activity to be carried out in order for them to be fulfilled. I find that quite extraordinary. This illegality that might be involved in following good practice is simply a red herring. There is no substance in that at all. And I'm sure the LGA would not even consider proposing guidelines for best practice which involved any illegality. So no, this motion in saying that this council should follow best practice as laid down by the LGA is perfectly legal and follows exactly the legal practices that have already been implemented by Havant Borough Council, who are doing their planning process by following LGA guidelines. They have set up development consultation forums, as is recommended by the LGA best practice guidelines. So really, I think we should dismiss this sliding in of some suggestion of illegality into the process. Absolutely, it has no relevance to this motion and has no relevance whatsoever to what is being proposed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapper. Councillor Page.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, since Councillor Tapper mentioned me, am I allowed to just respond very briefly to that?
You can make a point of clarification.
You can make a point of clarification, Councillor McClafferty.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor Tapper, if I didn't make myself clear. I wasn't in any way, shape or form trying to indicate that the LGA were suggesting that something should be done which is illegal. What I was suggesting, and without giving examples, and I can give examples, is the original motion was asking the council to do things which in actual fact were against the law. So they had nothing to do with LGA. Again, I'll just reiterate, I've got no problem if the LGA best practice is the thing to do. The local plan working group would look at that, would recommend it to the executive, and we would adopt it. So I don't have a problem there. The LGA are not suggesting anything illegal. It's the fact that the original motion requires us or proposes that we do things which are against the law.
Thank you, Councillor McClafferty. Councillor Page.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just to come in on that point, you know, I've looked at this with a fine-tooth comb as it sort of sits in my portfolio. Had other things not happened to me today, I would have been here a little bit earlier. But what I will say, and following Councillor Tapper's point, is that this council cannot unilaterally undertake consultations on behalf of the developer. I mean, despite it being against the role of the planning authority and a conflict of interest, all developers would drop their LGA responsibilities right away and wait for Surrey Heath to open their checkbook and carry out the consultation for them. It's absolutely ludicrous. I won't be voting for that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Any other members?
Councillor Wheeler actually wants to.
Councillor Fitzgerald has the right.
At the end, but Councillor Wheeler first. That's Councillor Wheeler if she would like to speak.
Okay. Councillor Wheeler, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and Chief Exec. I wasn't sure if I'd spoken so much at the original bit that that would have counted. So thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to speak further on the motion. I think that this is, in my view, almost like a holding motion until it can be discussed fully at the next local plan working group. When I think that following that, we can bring forward alternative recommendations, and taking on Councillor Galliford's point, to the Performance and Finance Committee would be the appropriate one for the local plan working group to bring anything back to before bringing up to the executive. But I think what it does do, and what is really, really important to me, is that we bring absolute clarity for our residents. And this gives a transparent end-to-end process. The pre-application advice, we are saying, will be made public unless an organisation can give us a really good reason not to do so. And that would be adhered to the legal interpretation of commercially sensitive. And that's something that they would have to explain to us and give the reason why. And most importantly, they would also have to give the date at which that information would no longer be exempt. So it gives absolute greater clarity. It also means that our residents don't have to go through the whole FOI process. That information is shared. It would be really disappointing, given that this is, to my mind, a strengthening of the Liberal Democratic movement, if they chose not to support this amendment this evening. I think it is quite evident from the discussion that has gone on in the chamber that, for very good reasons, the Liberal Democrat motion as it stood cannot be passed and will not be passed by the numbers of people that have already expressed an opinion. So if they don't support my motion and the community group motion, it runs the risk of us going back to the status quo. And I think that would be very, very disappointing, because I think they are right. Our residents deserve and want an end-to-end transparent process that takes us from the pre-application stage right the way through to the post-granting of an application and any non-material amendment that comes forward. And this gives all of our residents that transparent process. So I hope that the political point scoring can be put aside. Had Councillor Fitzgerald contacted me in my role as leader of the community group, then I would have been very happy with him to work on a wording that would have been more acceptable and also legally something that we could actually implement. And I'm very disappointed that they didn't. I have no idea why they didn't. And I hope that moving forward, we can all learn to work much more collaboratively together, so that when motions come forward at an appropriate time, i.e. ideally at the same time that we are having a council meeting, that we actually have something that is completely rounded, that as many members as possible from all political groups can support, because they are the right thing for the residents that voted us all here in the first place. So I do hope that members will support my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whelan.
Councillor Fitzgerald cannot reply. Yeah, I think Councillor Galliford, I think, has indicated that she wishes to speak.
Councillor Galliford and Councillor Fitzgerald does have a hand.
Okay, yeah.
Councillor Galliford and then Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So Councillor Galliford and then Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems very obvious to me that everybody at council this evening wants the best for the residents. We are looking forward, obviously, and wanting to improve our procedures, etc. The only thing really about all of this is that I feel that within the meeting this evening, we haven't really been given enough time, and I would like reassurances, and I believe Councillor Wheeler has just said that to some degree, that whatever we pass this evening does go to the local plan working group for further review and then moves on from there. And again, I just would like clarification from Councillor Wheeler that her amendment is to the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee. She's nodding, thank you. So that can then be passed to the exec and then passed again on to full council, because I think this deserves further debate. And as long as those are the correct procedures to go through, then I would be happy to agree to that. But I think it needs more time, more considered thought processes from all of us, and I just feel that this evening it's a bit rushed. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galliford. Councillor Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to reply to comments made during this evening. I thank you all for your participation again. I didn't note the word demand anywhere in my motion. It's funny that I didn't feel we were demanding anything, and I reiterate that I can't imagine how the LGA or government guidelines could commit the council to doing anything contrary to the law at any stage. Councillor Wheeler, your motion, your amendment to my motion was initiated by yourself, and I thought you might have contacted me. I'm not actually very contactable on Thursdays and Fridays, as I actually have to juggle 2 small children, which I look after up in London. So I have a very, very busy schedule on Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. I'm sorry, but I was unable to spend too much time. I heard about your amendment whilst I was in London and sort of out of contact. And I'm sorry I couldn't get back to you. I'm disappointed that it looks like the substantial part of my motion will fall this evening. And I am very disappointed that the council feels it's inappropriate to follow LGA guidelines and government guidelines. And I just think that writing items in like the Amendment B, which is fairly detailed, which we just got a brief look at this evening, that will stand in for this council to follow, might need a little bit more work to work through that, a little bit more effort to work through that wording. Anyway, I thank you all and pass back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Move to the vote.
Recorded vote, yeah.
I think so.
Well, members, we will go to a vote. It will be recorded, and
It's recorded if we have 3 members asking.
Yeah.
We will need to ask everybody's names. How we
would you like a recorded vote or just an ordinary? Councillor Mansfield wants a recorded vote. Is there anybody else wants a recorded vote? Councillor Perry, Councillor McClafferty. Right, so that will be a recorded vote, and we are voting on Councillor Wheeler's amendment, just to make sure everybody is certain of what they're voting on. It's been a very busy evening. So Mr. Payne will read out your names, and we will need to indicate whether you're voting in favour or against or abstaining.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Dan Adams.
In favour.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
For.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
In favour.
Councillor Rodney Bates.
For.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
Against.
Councillor Richard Brooks.
In favour.
Councillor Sarah Jane Croke.
In favour.
Councillor Vivian Chatman.
In favour.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
In favour.
Councillor Tim Fitzgerald.
Against.
Councillor Sharon Galliford.
In favour.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
In favour.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Favour.
Councillor Josephine Hawkins.
In favour.
Councillor Rebecca Jennings Evans.
In favour.
Councillor David Lewis.
In favour.
Councillor David Mansfield.
In favour.
Councillor Alan McClafferty.
In favour.
Councillor Emma McGrath.
In favour.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
In favour.
Councillor Sashi Mulvaganam.
Against.
Councillor Adrian Page.
In favour.
Councillor Robin Perry.
In favour.
Councillor Darrell Ratteram.
In favour.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Against.
Councillor John Skipper.
Against.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Against.
Councillor Pat Tedder.
For.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Against.
Councillor Valerie White.
In favour.
And Councillor Christian Wren.
Against.
Members, I declare the vote carried in favour, 24 votes to 8. That concludes the business of the meeting.
Okay, so that's a substantive motion. We need to comment on that. So this is a comment on the substantive motion now that that becomes a substantive motion.
Is there anybody, sorry, members, is there anybody that wishes to comment on the substantive motions? Oh, Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, first I want to express my disappointment at the characterisation from members of the council that the motion proposed was somehow going to be causing, the original motion was somehow going to cause the council to be illegal in its behaviour. I'm not really sure how much of the motion they actually read, because at no point of that motion was there a demand for any action, but it was an encouragement to follow the local government association best practice, which when we look at it is far more freer language than the motion we now face. Language proposed by Councillor Wheeler, which ties this council into a very specific action regarding the pre-application process, which really, if we want to change it, will require further work by this full council. Whereas if we had been able to follow local government association guidelines, it would actually enable this council to be much more flexible in its approach to the pre-application process. I just want to raise a few examples of what other councillors think was illegal, really. For example, the Local Government Association guideline highlights that many councils have adopted good working models for engaging both the community and elected local authority members in the pre-application discussions. And such as these are discussion at an early concept stage, member and community briefings, interim committee report presentation and discussion forums. And so this clearly was a motion, and I still think it is a motion that builds on Councillor Allaway's original motion. At no point do we think there was anything wrong with that motion, but I think we can still continue to go further. And just to respond to Councillor Bates's comments, I didn't speak on that motion because there was because I saw no need to speak on it. I agreed with it. If I have to speak every time I agree with something.
Sorry,
really,
Madam Mayor. Sorry,
I am now referring to the substantive motion in terms of it now limits us in
Can we have a point of order? Sorry, Madam Mayor, sorry, point of order. I don't think this is appropriate. The decision has been taken. I think this is really out of order. This is just
I'm speaking on a
grandstanding.
substantive motion, Madam Mayor.
So they're allowed to debate it.
I am told that Councillor Rise is perfectly in order. We can now debate the substantive motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it's just a few of the things that we are now not having at our disposal because of the language of this motion, such as a discussion forum, where the LGA guidance clearly says a developer or the council can host a discussion forum attended by officers, councillors, representatives of other statutory constituted bodies and community stakeholders. That's a clear way that this council could encourage early consultation on the pre-application process. This is not us saying the council will do it, but it's that the council could have done it. So I'm really disappointed by the motion that we have in front of us now, because it really does not provide this council the flexibility in restoring trust in the planning application process, a trust that has been so thoroughly diminished because of repeated actions so the community now no longer has trust, I believe. This motion should have been a chance for us to move forward. And again, I want to stress that there was no language in the original motion demanding the council do anything, but it enabled this council to be flexible in its approach to the pre-application process. I fully agree that this should go to the local plan working group, and on that I agree with Councillor Wheeler and others. But really, I think we have tied our hands here, and what we're going to find ourselves in a year, 2 years down the line, we will be in another council meeting debating this issue again. And I think that many members will come to the conclusion then that we really should just be following the Local Government Association best practice guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Councillor Malvagnam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make my position very clear here. The reason we actually brought this particular motion up because of the LGA guidelines. And also I've had various conversations outside this meeting saying that if our motion is passed or adopted, we would be happy to take this to the local working group, and then on to scrutiny committee, then on to the exec, and all the way through to the full council. This meeting could have been done literally in 5 minutes. By putting this motion by the community group, we've just prolonged it, and we are going to end up in the same sort of scenario. I can honestly and sincerely believe that the Conservative group, or the group which accepted this motion, there was an option. There is a way to do it. And we had offered that version, which is actually not literally written in the motion itself, but the process is there, which is a working group, PNF, exec, council. We could have had this meeting in literally 5 minutes. I'm sorry, they decided to prolong it. I really am disappointed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Malvagnam. Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Wheeler and then Councillor Bates were in front of me. I give way to them. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler, then Councillor Bates, then Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually would just like to come back to a point that was made by Councillor Rise, which said that he wasn't committing the council to anything. So the actual phrase within it and within their original motion was that the council must show leadership and engage in its own consultation. And I think for reasons that have been adequately explained by other members of this committee, I won't go over it again, as to the risk of us actually doing that and the potential risk that that would then have to a planning application and our ability to comment on it fairly and not be held to account. So it's not a question of showing leadership. It's absolutely right that we will be doing everything we can, and I think we do. And I think the motion, the substantive motion in front of us, encourages people and encourages applicants to engage with the local community. But actually, we cannot, in the wording of their motion, engage in its own, i.e. the council's own consultation. So I will just pick up on that. In terms of Councillor Malvagnam's, this could have all been over in 5 minutes. I'm so sorry, I didn't realise that democracy had to be hurried. And certainly just because it is more convenient to have something over in 5 minutes, if it's a motion which I don't feel is correct or is in the best interests of our residents, then just for the sake of expediency, given you've chosen to bring this motion this evening rather than to a full council meeting under normal process, I'm really, really upset that you feel that the democratic process should be hurried and be shushed. I would just like to thank everybody, or the majority of councillors, for supporting this motion. I think what is really important is that our residents understand that actually doing the right thing for them has got nothing to do with political allegiance. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am a bit reluctant to waste further time on Liberal Democrat wording, which has already been rejected. But can I just seek clarification, perhaps from one of our officers or or from legal, just on a factual point, which is regarding the issue that may or may not occur regarding pre-application consultation undertaken by the council. So the particular wording is where it says must engage in its own consultation. So must is a commitment, despite what some Liberal Democrats seem to understand. But in terms of that, can I just be clear? Because certainly it was my understanding that actually the council were not able to do that. Can obviously show positive leadership, that's no problem at all. But engaging in its own consultation, can we just seek clarification on that? Because there seems to be some dispute here between what I understood as officers' information and what we appear to be getting from Liberal Democrats. So I think it's just important that we just clarify that specific point about whether the council must engage in consultation if a developer declines to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Would you like to respond to that, Mrs. Rickard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd refer members to 16.3 in the officer note that was circulated, in which it's referred to significant and potentially unacceptable risk, and that therefore legal advice should be sought. We don't have that legal advice, and so I can't actually give you that advice. But the concern from officers was that the risk the council puts itself in as local planning authority, where it's effectively acting as an independent arbiter on planning applications, having previously effectively promoted them through consultation. Councillor Tapper mentioned the Havant Developer Forum, for example. That's a means by which the local council there facilitates discussion around developer ideas, but it is the developers undertaking the consultation through that forum, not the council. And therefore, if we wanted to go down the route of consulting ourselves, my advice would be to get legal advice before choosing to do so. But I don't have that legal advice at the moment.
Thank you, Mrs. Rickard. Oh, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Both the previous speakers have really taken up the points I wanted to say, and I'll repeat what I've said before. The Local Plan Working Group, which is a cross-party, is a very effective, hard-working, cross-party working group, putting together local plan policies which are of importance to all residents, not just those in parishes, but those in non-parished areas, both now and going forward, is very, very important group. And that is where this matter should have been raised, so that we can discuss things properly out of the full glare of the public. We can have an open, free change of views and then bring forward some recommendations. It is absolutely right that we continue to review our policies, and I'm highly supportive of that. And this would have been so much better if it had been brought through the proper channels dealing with planning matters, the Local Plan Working Group. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor McLafferty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually put my hand down because Councillor Edward Hawkins was saying very much along the lines that I was going to do, that the Local Plan Working Group is the place to have brought this with officer support and paper. I would just, I think, again, I recognise the time, but the comments are being made now that this paper is really only about, all it's about is getting us to adopt the LGA best practice. It's whatever it is, it's 3 pages and 1,000 words, and it doesn't take all that to say we should adopt LGA best practice. So there's far more to the motion, and quite rightly, there's a lot more to the motion But there's a number of things, not just the LGA thing, but a number of things that I disagree with. But it isn't, this motion was not just simply, this council recognises we should adopt LGA best practice. That's a misrepresentation of what the motion actually was, in my view.
Thank you, Councillor McClafferty. Is there any other members? No.
No one else has asked to think that Councillor Fitzgerald does have a right to reply at the very end.
Okay. So if there's no one else that wishes to speak, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Well, there seems to be no further speakers from members. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Just checking that.
Right, thank you, members. So that concludes the business.
We need to vote on this now. It's okay.
I'm not quite sure what we're voting on.
We're voting on this new substantive amendment.
Right, we've now got to vote on the new substantive motion.
Motion, that's right.
Do we need, would you like a recorded vote, or would you just like to call to your, there will be recorded, but 1, 2. Anybody else for recorded? That's 3. Right, Mr. Payne will call your names out and you can either record your vote or abstain.
Councillor Dan Adams.
In favour.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
In favour.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
So are we voting for the substantive motion as amended now?
Yes, we are. We are the one that Councillor Wheeler put forward.
Okay. In favour.
Councillor Rodney Bates.
In favour.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
I'm against.
Councillor Richard Brooks.
In favour.
Councillor Sarah Jane Croke.
In favour.
Councillor Vivian Chapman.
In favour.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
In favour.
Councillor Tim Fitzgerald.
Against.
Councillor Sharon Galliford.
In favour.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
In favour.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
In favour.
Councillor Josephine Hawkins.
In favour.
Councillor Rebecca Jennings Evans.
In favour.
Councillor David Lewis.
In favour.
Councillor David Mansfield.
In favour.
Councillor Alan McClafferty.
In favour.
Councillor Emma McGrath.
In favour.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
In favour.
Councillor Sashia Mulvaganam.
Against.
Councillor Adrian Page.
In favour.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Favour.
Councillor Darryl Ratteram.
In favour.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Against.
Councillor John Skipper.
Against.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Against.
Councillor Pat Tedder.
For.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
In favour.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Against.
Councillor Valerie White.
In favour.
Councillor Christian Wren.
Against.
So the motion has been.
Members, I declare the motion is passed. 24 votes for and 8 against and no abstentions. Third time I'm trying. That concludes the business of the meeting, and thank you all for your time and attending this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mayor. Well done.
Madam Mayor.
Stay